Hi, in this video we'll briefly look at the procurement process and see how it works. Now before you start procurement, the first thing that you have to look at is the market, the things that you're trying to buy, and the challenges are the market conditions. You have to see whether you have enough people who are willing to supply the things that you're looking for. If you have skilled manpower available, inflation, and then you have to look at the policies that your organization follows for procurement. Any has technical specifications. So what are the technical specifications? Will depend on your procurement. It could be a very simple specification if you're just buying some commodity. But generally, if you look at specifications, some of the things that you need to consider would be getting into larger contracts. Then you have to look at the experience of the supplier. You have to see whether they have the production capacity, um, the technical know-how, the quality systems that they have, what is their local experience, if your financial strength, and how many projects they currently have. For each one of these criteria, you have to define what is the weightage or what is the preference that you want to give to this criteria. Now, before you start the procurement process itself, remember you have to get um, transparency requires that you should be very clear about how you're going to proceed with the procurement, how are you going to do the evaluations, and how you're going to do the selection, what selection method you're going to use. So all of this comes up front, and this is part of your procurement document. So there are three main type of documents that are issued. So a quotation is typically issued for very simple commodity items. Bid or tender would be for capital. If you are uh, buying services like consulting, then you would use something which is called a request for proposal. So you have the document, you start the process. There are going to be three things. The first step in the process is participation, which is basically who's going to be allowed to bid for this contract. So that's participation. Then the bid process, how the submissions are going to come in, that is the bid process. And finally, once you've done the evaluations, uh, how are you going to make the selection that comes in the selection method. So there are three steps. So we're going to look at each one, okay, one by one. So participation. And so participation is actually the objective of procurement is always transparency and openness. You want as many bidders to participate as possible, because if there's competition, you will get better rates and better services. So that's the predominant thing: uh, open participation. But sometimes you have selective participation. Selective is when you are buying something of low value. So, for instance, you're buying just a single toner, or some small number of stationery supplies. It doesn't make a lot of sense for you to go and advertise them and to spend all that time trying to acquire these things. So that is like small purchases. You can use direct quotations. That means you directly go to three or more suppliers and get their prices and pick the lowest one. Or it could be that sometimes selective is required when you need to buy a part. Let's say you have a machinery that's made by a company and it requires a spare part. Naturally, you want to go to the same company and get the spare part. So that is also selective, but it's because it's proprietary. And the last case is when is an emergency. And this happens when time is of essence. For instance, after an earthquake, you have to get tents. You don't have the liberty to spend, 2 weeks on advertising and then another week or two on technical evaluation. You need supplies immediately from whoever is available. So in that case, you would use emergency procurement. So that is also a special case of selective. In terms of open, there are two basic things. Open can be direct or pre-qualification based. So what is the difference between the two? Direct is that you create a tender document and you advertise it and allow anyone who wants to bid to come and get the tender documents from you. So that's a direct one. But sometimes you might be procuring something that's fairly complex and it requires some expertise. And to make sure that you only get bidders who have the correct expertise to participate in this tender, you could use pre-qualification. Now, what pre-qualification does is that we advertise a pre-qualification notice and we, put out a technical criteria for pre-qualification. Companies will come and submit a pre-qualification document. So at this time, they're not bidding for anything. They're simply expressing their interest and highlighting their capabilities. So you go through the evaluation and you figure out which companies are technically qualified. You would have a score, let's say 65%. If anyone gets 65%, they're pre-qualified. Below 65, they're not pre-qualified. And then what happens is that you only give the tender document to the companies that are pre-qualified. So some of the things that you can, you know, do in pre-qualification is to check whether they understand the need, whether they have the capabilities, they have the right management approach, they have the financial capacity to do this work, what size of business you're dealing with. If you have a project that is in billions, you want to see whether they've done anything of that sort before. So those things are important for pre-qualification. Now, so at this stage, you've got so either you ran a pre-qualification or you ran a open tender. But now the next step would be that the tender comes in. So how do you process it? How do you process the tenders? So there are two basic ways of doing. There's a single stage and a two stage. By stage I mean submission. In a single stage, the bidder will make one submission. In two stage, they will make two submissions. And then within a single stage, there's something called one envelope, and then there's something called a two envelope. And the same thing happens in two stages. Let's go and see how this works and when to use it. First, when to use it. Single stage is predominantly used for procurement. So almost 90% plus of procurements that you would see would be single stage. And it is generally used when the scope is well defined, there are multiple providers, and the solution and you're very clear about the solution that you want. So that would be single stage. Two stage is used when you want to have a flexibility to pick between multiple solutions. So you don't specify a solution, you specify a need, and you feel like there are multiple ways of addressing the need. So, or the procurement itself is complex, where you need to discover some more, get input from vendors, and then that will put you in a position to finalize the specs. So that's two stage. So two stage takes longer. Let's see how the process works. In a single stage, single envelope, this is the most simplest type of procurement. So for instance, this could be used for just buying printers, or like I said, stationery, or standard items, it's commercial off-the-shelf items. How does it work? The bidder will submit to you a tender document in a single envelope, which will contain both the financials and the technical. So in the technical side, the bidder would identify the specifications of what they're proposing and the quantities, and in the financial side, the cost. And the way it works is that you open these, so you would open the envelope, you take out the technical and financial, and you quickly go through the technicals to see if the technical is compliant. Let's say if you ask for 300 dpi printer, you want to make sure that they only quoted 300 dpi. If somebody quoted 250, that would be disqualified. So once you have all the qualified bidders, out of those qualified bidders, what you do is you look at the financials and see the lowest score, and you pick that as the successful bidder. So it's very straightforward, but it's going to be used for procurements that are very standardized, commercial off-the-shelf commodity items. Now, let's say you have a slightly more complicated situation. For instance, you're getting bids for the construction of a building. So it's not something that you can simply take, a sheet of paper that you can quickly study and find out who's qualified and who's not qualified. In this case, we use a single stage two envelope. So two envelope means that the submission is going to come with a technical envelope and a financial envelope. Both of them are sealed separately. When the bids are opened, the technical envelopes are opened and the financials are just kept aside. Okay, they're left unopened. You carry out the technical evaluation, and in this case, let's say you set up a so technical evaluation can take a week or it can take more depending on the size of the contract. And once your evaluation is done, everyone gets a technical score. The technical score is used to make sure that you eliminate everyone who's below 65% on the technical score. So for those bidders, you would inform them that they are not qualified and their financial bids will be returned to them unopened. For the remaining bidders, you would open their financial bids and then you would proceed to award either to the lowest, or we will see other methods of award also later on. Now in a two-stage, what happens? In a two-stage, you have two-stage one envelope. What happens is that you will put out a technical requirement, and different companies will bid for it. So remember, in this case, we have flexibility. People can have multiple solutions. For example, if you were putting up a bid for let's say a 2 megawatt power to be supplied in a remote area, and you're leaving it open, it's possible that somebody can do solar, somebody can propose wind, someone else can do a micro hydro. So you're open to multiple solutions over here. So you put the technical out, then you when you get, so the bidders will in the first stage of the two stage, in the first stage the bidders will submit their technical proposals. You look at the technical proposals and see which proposals meet your requirements, and then based on discussion, so you eliminate the ones that don't meet your requirements, keep the ones that meet your requirements, and then within the ones that meet your requirement, you have a discussion with the different vendors, and you create a revised technical requirement document, and you issue that document to them. So now they go back and they're going to come up with a revised technical quote, which is based on these requirements that have been changed now, and they also give you a financial quote. And then so you could award, then you proceed with the award depending on the method that you're going to use. So it says award to the lowest here, but we'll look at alternate methods also. So two-stage, two envelope. The only difference here is that when you get the initial technical proposals, you also get financial proposals from these companies. You keep the financial proposals separately, they're unopened. Go through the process of normalization. Any bidder that is not qualified, their financials are returned to them, and finally they get new requirement, they do another submission, and in this case they will do a technical and financial again. Now what's the role of the original financial that you had? Well, the original financial is with you, and you have the original technical that they gave you, and that can be a reference point to compare how much the prices have changed from from the initial to the revised proposals. So it can help to anchor some of these prices. Let's say if I put 100 million in my initial bid and 500 in the revised bid. So in a two envelope situation, I would be able, the client would be able to look at these two and see whether it makes sense that the price has gone up by 400 million. If it was a single envelope, then I would only get a 500 million over here, and there is no reference point in terms of the earlier financial bid. So that is the advantage that you get with the two envelope, two stage. Now, at the end of the bid process, you should have two things. You should have technical scores for all the bidders that have applied, and you should also have the financial bids of everyone. So those two, that data is now going to be used with the selection method to finally choose who will get the contract. Now there are three methods for making the selection. There's the least cost method. Least cost means that I look at all the bids and I pick the one that is the lowest cost. So I don't look at the technical score. All I am interested in is to make sure that all the technical scores are above 65%. That's it. So out of those, I will just pick the least. And this is what is typically used for capital projects like roads or bridges or buildings or whatever. And it is also used where materials are predominant, for if you're buying computers, servers, things of that sort, or commodities, you would use least cost. Because what you're saying in least cost is that it meets your requirement. Anything that meets your requirement, you want to pick the one that costs the lowest of all the bids that meet your requirement. In a service environment, usually in a very simple services, least cost is workable. So for instance, you're doing basic surveys or designs which are repetitive designs, simple design. But let's say you're making a building and a hospital. So the design, a lot of the work in this is for the design work. It's basically services, and you don't want to just pick based on the least cost, but you want to actually give some weightage to finance, also finance and technical. So that would be something called a quality cost based selection, QCBS. And here it's basically what you're looking for. It's important for you to see that the company that's applying has the capability to deliver also, and to deliver at the quality that you're wanting. So you want companies that are scoring higher in terms of technical, but they're also cost effective. So you're taking a combination of the both. Typically, in a QCBS, you would have a technical score and a financial score, and the technical score is typically given a higher weight. So 70 to 90% would go to the technical score, and the balance would go to the financial score. And then the last one is the quality based selection, is QBS. And QBS is used where the work is very complex and you don't want to take any chances with the quality of the service. You want the best possible company to do the work. So this could be something really complicated, like say you're making a 40-story building and you don't want to take a chance by getting someone to work on structure who's not the best. So in a QBS, what happens is that you make a selection purely on the technical score. You don't look at the financial score. So whoever gets the highest technical score, that's the company that you will work with. Let's look at a practical example using these three methods. We have a table which is showing us 4 companies. So the first thing that we do is we look at Power Tech, which has a score of 60 on technical. That disqualifies it, so we get rid of that. Then we look at the financial bids of the remaining 3, and from these financial bids we pick up the lowest bid, which is 65. Next we calculate the financial scores, which is the lowest bid divided by the bid value. So the first one is 65 over 110. The next one would be 65 divided by 75, and the last one is 65 divided by 65. So that would give us the financial score. Finally, to calculate the composite score, we multiply the technical scores by 0.7, and we multiply the financial scores by 0.3 because we're using a 70-30 in the QCBS. So this gives us the scores for financial and also the total composite score. Now if you want to make a least cost selection, you look at the highest financial score or the lowest bid, which is 65, and that gives us Fastworks as our selected bidder. Next, we will look at the QCBS selection with 70-30, and if you look at the column with the total score, you can see that the highest score is 82. So, and that is with Z Corp. So we'll pick Z Corp as the successful bidder on QCBS basis. Finally, at QBS, we look at the highest technical score, which is Lightsoft, has 90, and hence we would pick Lightsoft as the selected bidder. So notice, like in this table, we had different selections based on the method that we picked. So whether we picked the lowest QCBS or the QBS selection.